did not mean selecting her full political entourage for jobs in the campaign or government. Their reality that Harris seemed to have accepted. Like, yeah, Ian Sams as press secretary, no, thank you. But even still, within the Biden team, it was understood that a rule would apply even to her sister, Maya Harris, a former Hillary Clinton advisor who was Kamala Harris's closest confidant. But a Biden spokesman said on Thursday night that the matter with Maya Harris did not come up in conversations with the senator. So just smoothing out those staff relationships seems to be a big thing for them. But that's kind of an idea of how they will govern. Do want to move on now to this another angle on this, which I think comes from Discourse blog, Paul Blest, in a very interesting way of looking at this. So Harris could have been Harris is picked, probably the most likely outcome. Paul Blest writing here. She's not Pete Buttigieg or Susan Rice or former Orlando Police Chief Val Demings. She's not Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, or even Karen Bass. Like Biden, she's an ideological chameleon. She came into elected office as a tough-on-crime prosecutor in 2004, and by 2019, she was espousing the language of social justice and criminal justice reform. She knows the country is trending left and has made overtures to progressives, including a Medicare for All plan that immediately fell flat. And to be fair, Harris is well to the left of most of the Senate's Democrats on few key issues, namely domestic worker rights and giving people money to get them through the pandemic. The Harris pick was predictable, but what's more interesting to me, at least, is what happened to Bass, one of the former frontrunners that the Biden campaign didn't pick, and the role that one of the worst parts of the Democratic Party, namely its Florida branch, played in her demise. The events underscore one central point, that as long as Florida Democrats continue to hold any kind of sway, the party as a whole will suffer. So Bass here is the current chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, former Speaker of the California State Assembly and committee organizer. She probably would have been the olive branch to the left choice because she's a longtime supporter of Medicare for All, and a pretty reliable progressive vote in the House. She's a pragmatist. She's had some good votes, but she's not like Bernie Sanders. She's not a super lefty, but she's definitely gotten a lot less left since she's gotten to Congress. Let's put it that way. She also didn't seem to have much interest in being president, was generally known to be a team player in the House. So even if she's on the left, it's safe to assume she wouldn't have rocked too many boats in the Biden White House. But if Biden had any intention of ever choosing Bass, Florida Democrats snuffed it out immediately. Why? Because Bass had the gall to treat communists as human beings. Well, when she expressed her condolences after Fidel Castro died in 2016, which again, the insanity of this violent, really just repellent reaction to Fidel Castro, a guy who has, of course, done authoritarian things. If we want to talk about authoritarian, like in terms of like arresting, dissidents and stuff like that, I think you also have to take into account the numerous times that he was almost freaking assassinated by the United States, and the fact that many factions of the United States government would not want nothing better but to see him dead. And of course, he's trying to run a country here. Also, by the way, a country that has come up with a freaking vaccine for AIDS that nobody wants to talk about. But it's really ridiculous to see this just freaking out about a guy who, well, again, doing a lot of bad things. Like, there's other things to take into account here. So, pretty much she specifically says, she said, Comandante en Jefe, the commander-in-chief. She called him commander-in-chief. Like, oh my God, like, what a travesty. Like, she said this in 2016 when she passed away. But, and of course, all that was dumped out by, like, the freaks like Ed Rendell and Chris Dodd, who are like, never will we have Karen Bass on the ticket. Like, we freaked out. But, so the comms are troubling. It shows a lack of understanding of what the Castro regime was about. So I have to learn about her position and perspective on Fidel Castro, says Miami State Representative Javier Fernandez, telling Politico that in June, Bass walked the comments back, but by the end of July, The Atlantic's Edward Isaac Dover, the go-to reporter for spilling dirt on any nominally left candidate, had a piece out about Bass going to Cuba in 1973. Oh no. Then Politico reported in August that Bass had eulogized a former member of the Communist Party O'Neill Marion Cannon as a friend and mentor. One anonymous Carol DNC member told Politico, "We probably lose Florida if it's passed." And there was this quote from a Florida Democratic pollster, Fernand Amandi. Karen Bass says she is not a communist, but she clearly has no qualms about associating or praising communists, which to most Hispanic voters in Florida, fairly or unfairly, is tantamount to being one. It was a coordinated effort to sink Bass. We cannot get that wrong. Like, this was a coordinated effort to sink someone who isn't really a left-wing candidate, just has the veneer of one. And that should be a reminder to everybody out there. That is what they're willing to do. Like, anybody nominally close to the levers of power on the left, all the oppo comes out, all the words, all the research, it all comes out. Because there can be no dissent. There can be no erring from the orthodoxy of the Democratic Party. You stay in line or you get attacked with the full force of it. Like, that is what it is. And that is what we see again. So, last week, the AP reported a similar story with a lead focus on a 22-year-old undecided voter of Cuban descent, despite the fact that the AP noted that most Cuban Americans born in the country or those who arrived after 1980 are in favor of restoring diplomatic relations with Cuba. The AP quoted Armandi again, quote, "The litmus test in Florida is do no harm because it's a state that's always decided by the thinnest of margin. Just taking off the table any segment of the Florida electorate could prove fatal. So rest in peace to Karen Bass' chances undone by being nice about two guys when they died." Of course, anyone to the left of Charlie Crist from now on shall not be tolerated. I mean, if this sounds familiar, it's because it is. The Florida Democratic Party appears to exist solely to fight incremental progress and run smear jobs on anyone who's ever shaken a socialist hand. Bass is just the latest example. So a similar thing happened to Bernie Sanders earlier this year because Sanders had the indecency to attribute Cuba's high literacy rate to the Castro regime. Again, this is a country, keep in mind, that the U.S. has starved out, tried to kill their leader multiple times, and wanted to see, like, a crater in the freaking dirt. Like, that's been the U.S. foreign policy opinion on Cuba for a very, very long time. I mean, it's kind of wavered. It's kind of a little bit back and forth. Obama normalizing relations. But for a long time, Fidel Castro was the big, big threat in American foreign policy. We did our best we can to starve the country of any resources to make it look like there was no way that a socialist candidate or a socialist leader could possibly succeed. And, of course, that's had devastating effects on the Cuban people, but we don't care about that, obviously. But yeah, again, they did the same thing to Bernie Sanders ahead of the Florida Democratic Party's election for its own chair in January 2017 and for the national DNC election the following month. Florida Democratic activists and fundraisers dumped the oppo book on both Dwight Bullard and Keith Ellison, two black men and candidates for those jobs whose crimes were respectively going to Israel with Dream Defenders and being Muslim. That's all it was. And Dream Defenders is just an activist group. The man Florida Democrats eventually selected to be their chair was billionaire commercial real estate developer Stephen Biddle, who lasted less than a year because of several allegations of sexual misconduct, and then was accused of sexual misconduct again a year later. Biddle famously owned a breast-shaped stress ball, which he kept in his office, where one woman told Politico, quote, "There was a lot of boob stuff." So yeah, that doesn't disqualify you. Sexually harassing your peers, it's fine with me, but looking at Fidel Castro with one eye, then you're done. Like, that is the hilarious part. And earlier this month, The Intercept reported on what sure looked like a successful effort by Representative Donna Shalala to kill a rollback on the Trump administration's sanctions on Cuba in order to protect a single Miami area freshman, Debbie Mercarso-Powell. But while Florida Democrats are really great at preventing things from moving even nominally to the left, they're utterly useless at everything else. Just a few examples from the past month include the state party accepting hundreds of thousands of PPP loans in April, a possibly illegal move that was immediately jumped on by Republicans. And in July, The Intercept reported that more than 50 Democratic legislative candidates with their state party begging for access to NGP Van, the Democratic voter database that's essential for campaigns. The state party was charging candidates anywhere between $750 to $3,500 for access, depending on what they were running for. Cartoonishly bad administration could be perhaps forgiven if Florida Democrats actually won, but they don't to that either. No Florida Democratic gubernatorial candidate has actually won this century. In 2018, Florida was the red wall, keeping the blue wave from becoming a tsunami. The Democrats not only lost a gubernatorial race to Ron DeSantis, they also lost a United States Senate race to Rick Scott, the state's deeply unpopular incumbent governor, and the man who quite possibly has the world's deadest eyes and soul. There is growing evidence that the hardline policies towards Cuba aren't even necessary to win Florida. In fact, the most popular Democratic candidate in the state in the last 20 years has been Barack Obama, the same man who began the process of normalizing relations with Cuba and was slammed with a socialism label nonstop by the GOP for years. It is really kind of ridiculous. So, Comunismo, says Michael Garcia, the son of a Cuban emigre who works at his family-owned accounting business. I shouldn't have to pay more taxes because I work harder than other people. Thing that Obama say scare me because everything that Fidel said. These things are associated in my mind with going down the path of communism. This is a quote from late October report in 2008 about how Obama was driving fears among older Cuban Americans about potentially giving John McCain a firewall in Florida. Of course, didn't really work. Obama is saying 100% the same things that Castro was saying before 1959. Says Nerti Piscola, who left Cuba as a teenager in 1969. It sounds good. Many people want to be equal, but the result is that everyone is equal and everyone's poor. So again, Obama won in Florida by nearly 3,000 votes. During his first term, he eased some of the sanctions and travel restrictions on Cuba. He paid a heavy price for this treachery against Florida exiles by winning the state again in 2012. So yeah, again, this Florida Democrat stuff needs to stop, and we got to keep an eye on this as a left, because this is, again, another tactic along with the smearing of the Bernie bros, the smearing of the BS against Alex Morse. This is the stuff that's going to hold us back, and this is the stuff that needs to stop. All right. So we do have a very interesting international story for you at the moment. We're talking about this peace deal that is really getting a lot of attention from people like Donald Trump and those on the right, and pretty much in the quote-unquote establishment of both American and Israeli politics, including Donald Trump. He said huge breakthrough today on Twitter as he announced the deal made between Israel and the UAE. The deal makes the UAE the first Gulf Arab state and third Arab nation after Egypt and Jordan have diplomatic ties with Israel. Again, shows you how the kind of fear-mongering about, if we give up at least one of our nuclear weapons, and if we stop bombing the crap out of Palestine and in Gaza and shooting their kids with snipers and starving them and making them their place in uninhabitable prison, they're going to come and get us. Like, again, that shows you just how I think really overstated it is that, especially in today's current political climate, that the animosity that all these Middle Eastern countries have, like, oh, Israel, like they're just surrounded by enemies. No one likes them. Everybody hates them. They're out to get them all. No, that's ridiculous. UAE, Egypt, and Jordan, they all have diplomatic ties. Like, things are, I think, if you look at the broad scheme of things, warming up, not cooling down. Tensions are cooling down, and relations are warming up, I should say. Medea Benjamin and Ariel Gould, Code Pink, write about this for Wonderfully in Common Dreams. Of course, the wonderful Code Pink people doing great work on this issue, on Venezuela, and a bunch of other super, super important issues when it comes to war and peace. But this Israel-UAE partnership should fool no one. Though it will supposedly stave off Israeli annexation of the West Bank, which is pretty good. I mean, you could take any of that reduction of the just awful annexation of the West Bank is a good sign. Like, we like to see that. But, of course, it should never happen at all. Like, they've been moving in on the West Bank. They've been settling there for years. and it's been illegal the whole time, so it's a pretty important thing to recognize. In reality, it is nothing more than a scheme to give an Arab stamp of approval to Israel's status quo of land theft, home demolitions, arbitrary extrajudicial killings, apartheid laws, and other abuses of Palestinian rights. The deal should have been seen in the context of over 3 years of the Trump administration's policies that have tightened Israel's grip on the Palestinians, moving the U.S. embassy to Tel Aviv, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing the goal